Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Vice Chair.
Hey, good morning.
I should unmute. Good morning.
There we go. Now I can hear.
Figure this out. Well, good morning, everybody. I know that Christian was going to join us by phone, so I believe we have Christian on the line. Good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and call to order the Yamhill. Is that you, Christian?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay. We'll
Yes,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm in there.
Well, we're glad you're here in any capacity. Thank you. We'll call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for November 22nd, 2021. And Commissioner Bershauer, would you lead us in the pledge?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. Our joint calendar session, anything to add to the calendar?
No, Chair, I've got the OSU Extension's Vice Provost meeting. Commissioner Bershauer and I on that one, and I believe that's in there. That's the only thing for this week, and I hope that you have a great Thanksgiving also.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Commissioner.
Well, I don't think this is an official event, but if we're all going to be at the McMinnville parade on Friday, then we might all be at the parade.
Okay, thank you for that.
We can add that to the calendar just in case
Okay.
for Friday.
Okay.
And then I'll say that Commissioner Bershauer and I believe, have Jobs Council next Thursday, but I don't know if we're going to make it because it's an hour into our commissioner meeting. So
Right.
we should have it on the calendar, just because if we slip into it afterwards, we'll both be there.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll move on to public comment. We did receive public comments regarding a future work session that the board will be doing on time, place, and manner. And so thank you, everybody who submitted comments. On to our first work session, item E, which is a presentation from Yamhill Fire Protection District. And Commissioner Bershauer, would you want to lead this off?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. So we should have either Chief Jensen or Chief Bergstrom or both joining us. And they are going to give us an update. They won some very prestigious awards. There was a statewide award, I believe, for District of the Year, and then an international award for recruit and retention. So they are coming on to give us an update, and it's pretty big news considering the struggles that our fire departments have had with retaining volunteers and making sure that the departments are healthy. So welcome, Chief Bergstrom.
Welcome, Chief, and that's no small accomplishment in this job market. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we were, just to give you a little background, 2 years ago, I was brought on as the recruit retention coordinator for Yamhill Fire Protection District. We'd actually started about 3 years ago with this process, but 2 years ago, we were awarded a grant, SAFER grant, funded through FEMA. And sorry about that, I missed some settings. And what that has allowed us to do is it allows my position to be funded, but it gives quite a bit of money, funds available towards retention and recruitment of new volunteers, with a focus on, our focus has been primarily community, bringing back some of the old good traditions within the fire service, but also bringing our fire service into more modern training techniques, that kind of thing. To give you a little update, in the last 2 years, we went from a staff of about 20 to 21 to just shy of 50 volunteers in 2 years. Over half of those are EMTs, certified EMTs, and total roster, I think we have all but 2 that are certified as emergency medical responder. So what we've done is we really picked up our training, our firefighters, firefighting training, and so forth and so on. So this year we were recognized by the International Association of Fire Chiefs and the Volunteer Combination Officers staff for the Recruit Retention Coordinating Department of the Year. And so I just got back last week from Florida, went to the Symposium in the Sun meeting down there in Florida, had a great time. But what that does is it's departments from all over the United States come together, talk about some of the key issues and compare notes on what everybody's doing, techniques, recruitment, that kind of thing. I can say that this is the first time anybody west of Texas has ever received this award. So I was very proud of our organization to be able to represent the West Coast, let alone Oregon and Yamhill County. I can tell you from coming back from that, took a lot of great notes, got a lot of great contacts, and we are going to be gearing up not only locally, but I'm going to try to be pushing these efforts countywide because we do see that it's there is a problem with retaining volunteers, getting volunteers and keeping them and training them and so forth and so on. But the biggest thing is not from a lack of people wanting to volunteer. It's we need to really focus on our organizations of changing the culture, changing the environment, and offering a organization, a place where volunteers feel welcome and feel like they can actually be a part of something and contribute. That has been one of the biggest things that we've noticed is if you have volunteers, but you don't utilize those volunteers, they don't want to stay. It's a very great problem to have, but if you don't use them and don't train them and don't let them feel like part of the team, they're not going to stay. So that's some of our efforts, what we've been working on, and knock on wood, Lord willing, we've been really blessed to get the numbers that we have. So that's just a little update from Yamhill, Oregon.
Thank you, Chief. And thank you, Commissioner Bershauer, for bringing this to our attention. Chief, knowing that so many districts are struggling significantly, especially here in Yamhill County, what advice would you have? And would you be able to offer some counsel to them as far as how you've been able to not only recruit and retain, because we've got some pretty big issues in the county?
It's funny. I'm a cheerleader for this and something I'm very passionate about. And yeah, Yamhill has a policy of anything that we can do, whether it be another department or a person, all anybody has to do is ask. We're more than willing to help and share on any of that. The biggest thing, and I would say nationwide, is there's been a change within the fire and EMS culture the last, we'll say, couple decades of the separation between volunteerism and paid. And there's become this division, which, countrywide there's a division, but getting past that. And it really starts with your leadership coming down to it and saying, hey, look, we are here to provide a service to our community. That's the first and foremost goal of every fire department. We're providing a service, and getting past that paid versus volunteer and just coming together as we are one fire department. It doesn't matter if you're paid or you're volunteer. We're all equal. We're all the same. So yeah, if there's anything I can do or my organization can do, I would be more than happy to share, to talk, brainstorm, whatever we can do to help build this, because I'm a firm believer in healthy competition. If we're doing well, or let's say a department let's say Carleton Fire, if they're doing really well with their volunteer numbers and their department's doing well, that healthy competition is going to raise our level and so forth and so on. So It's absolutely not a thing where we just want to be the shining stars and not think about anybody else. It's only going to help us if we can all start building our departments better. A little note, 76% of all fire departments in the United States are volunteer or a combination of paid and volunteer. So to have that narrative that volunteerism is a thing of the past strictly isn't, I mean, frankly, isn't true. Like I said, our focus is community. And with that, we've gone into the schools. We've started a fire science program that is now accredited through the state as a state science credit for these high school kids. So not only can they take the class, but it's a science credit. So instead of taking biology or chemistry or something like that, they can take fire science, get some real life skills, and really see if that's a direction they want to go into. So yeah, the long answer, yeah, I could go on for hours about different ways that each department, and every department's different, but each way we could all change our department or do things a little bit different to help bring up our volunteer numbers.
Thank you, Chief. We're going to hold you to that.
Okay. My
So
pleasure.
Chief, if we want to come and honor your volunteers, you have an event coming up soon.
Well, we have a couple of events. That is one thing, Yamhill Fire, we always have something going on. December, well, let me back up. December 2nd, which is a Thursday night at 7 p.m., we will be doing our annual Christmas party. And that's where we invite all the volunteers, their families, the chief and I. We do all the cooking. We do a big feast for everybody. We hand out awards and that kind of thing. So that'd be a great way if any of you are interested, please. You don't even have to let us know you're coming. We'll make room for you. But it starts at 6 o'clock. Usually it's at 7, but this year is 6 o'clock. And then that Saturday, we're having our annual breakfast with Santa. We're bringing that back. COVID kind of kicked us in the teeth last year with it, but that'll be another great opportunity for all of our volunteers are there. We're cooking food. Olaf and the whole cast of Frozen are going to be there, and Santa Claus is going to be there. So, so yeah, you guys are more than welcome. We'd love to have you.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you being here, and keep safe, and thank you for your good work. And we hope it's contagious for the other districts in the county. But congratulations to you and your team.
Appreciate
Thank you.
that.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
truly. Thank you very much. And maybe not contagious. We can figure something else out, Chair. Thank you,
Too
Chief.
soon.
Yeah.
Too soon for
Infectious,
that.
no. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Chief.
Appreciate it. All right, we'll move on to our next work session, number 2, which is the review and discussion of the SEDCOR quarterly report and discussion of American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA Impact Industries Grant. And I believe we have Abisha on deck. Abisha Stone from SEDCOR is here, I believe. So Ken?
Yes, and both Abisha and Eric will be joining us this morning.
Welcome, Eric. Thank you both for being here. And we have a review of that proposal that you've sent to us. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Sorry,
Morning.
it took a while to transition onto the screen, so I
Good
lose a
morning.
little bit of what you're saying. Yeah, thank you for having us. And so as Ken mentioned, Eric Anderson has joined us as well this morning. Of course, he's the president of SEDCOR. And since we'll be talking about a recommendation for the execution of the grant programming associated with the ARPA funds, we thought it'd be best if we're both here in case you have real hard questions that we need Eric to answer. So would you like me to go ahead and just kick it off? Okay. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again for, first of all, for the inquiry, right? So at the last quarterly update, when we gave recommendation by the EDAC on how they felt that the board should approach grant programming for use of industry impacted ARPA funds, the board requested whether SEDCOR could consider participating in hosting the grant programs, right? And this is more of a capacity issue and also, I think, a industry impact opportunity as well. And so we went back to our team. Eric and I had a robust discussion with our team and some of our local partners on how best to approach this sort of management of a grant program in partnership, right? So looking at it not just to say, how do you actually service the grants, right? But more so to say, how do we engage businesses along the way in really intentional and supportive ways? So as we are working to get applicants to the program, how do we make sure that those who maybe don't qualify for this program have access to other programs they do qualify for? How do we identify opportunities for next year even, right? So if there's programs that are looking for funding, or if we have a supply chain innovation, but they're not quite ready for money this year, how do we engage them ongoing so that we can support them into next year? So I do appreciate the fact that the board asked us what we could do to consider supporting this program. I did submit a proposal that I know Ken shared out with you all, so I certainly will not read that line by line, but I would like to be able to answer any questions that you might have for us as they pertain to that proposal. I do want to call your attention to the request for county staff support. We will absolutely need some county staff support to ensure that we're meeting Treasury guidelines as we develop the program, right? So we just want to have that back and forth to ensure, as Ken usually reminds us, that we are making sure that we're meeting Treasury and also county expectation in terms of financial management, things like that. But for the most part, this would be SEDCOR developing the program, executing the program, creating and supporting the grant review committee through the process, and then actually servicing the loans, or the grants rather, my apologies. So Eric, before we go to questions from the board, was there anything that I missed that you'd like to add?
No, thank you once again. Just like Abhishek was saying, we're pleased to be able to work with the commission to figure out how we can kind of add value to this work and leverage the relationships with the business community that Abhishek and the rest of the team here have been able to develop over the years. I think it's been a very different for a lot of us, the last 18 months have been a very different way of approaching business. And I think the partnerships that we've built with some of our other partners, like the community college and SBDC and Willamette Workforce Partnership and Council of Governments around getting resources out to all types of businesses has been very important in how we kind of approach this type of work too. And frankly, I don't think we would have been as strong a proposal 2 years ago. I think the fact that we've really gotten into this work over the last 18 months and figured out some really strong best practices to follow have enabled us to be able to, with confidence, make this proposal to you. And we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Ken, thank you, Eric.
Yeah, and if I may, because just to kind of set the stage for those who may be observing the meeting or watching the meeting and maybe kind of missing the big picture portion of this and what we're talking about. If you remember that during previous work sessions, as part of the ARPA funds, they're in the various eligible categories, the board identified an amount for economic impacts, which is just over 6.8 million. And then as part of that was the impacted industry grants. And then based on discussions, what we were looking at doing and looking for that partnership is what you have before you is a proposal where instead of the county directly facilitating and releasing grant funds, which is approximately 33% of that 6.8 million. So it's a total of 2.2 million. Being available for impacted industry grants. And that's what is the funding source, and what we're looking at essentially having a sub-recipient to where the county would release the funds to SEDCOR to administer the program of that 2.2 million based on what's being proposed, what Abhishek proposed. So I just wanted to kind of give a brief overview on, just in case there's questions about, the higher level and how we got here. And so it's in the packet, and I also forwarded the proposal to the commissioners. And so again, just wanted to give that 35,000 foot view.
Thank you, Ken. I had a question. I'm sorry, Abhishek, go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to thank Ken for that background, and then also just remind the board that the EDAC recommendation was to expend half of the $2.26 million this year, the portion that had been received, and then for us to make recommendation for use of those funds next year. So we also did incorporate a survey component into our proposal for the businesses. We said we would be looking at doing some data capture this year, and I'm also performing a deep dive BRE survey for our industry partners in the county. That will be done in January. So we are using this as an opportunity to do some of that data capture. As we mentioned, we don't want to have to expend additional funds to try to, get data from consultants. We want to be able to go directly to our businesses. So that is captured in here as well for recommended use of next year's allocation of those funds. So thank you.
Thanks, Abhishek. Question, when you talk about the subrecipient component of that, Ken, I know we talked earlier in the very beginning about what we could do to take some of the load off administration and staff here as far as contracting that out. And some counties have made the decision to do that. Would this be covered? I'm assuming that it would be covered, any fees that we would pay or any of the contract costs for this particular piece alone? Because it's ARPA related, and that would be just that piece.
So administrative costs, because I know there's discussions around that. Administrative costs are an eligible expense. So if we can utilize a portion of our ARPA allocation if we're subcontracting, or if we are, I think in here as part of the proposal, there's a 10% administrative fee that's requested for rolling this out. That's eligible. There's not in the rules a set administrative fee. In fact, there's a lot of discussion during last week's AOC. I know each county has a slightly different interpretation on what that means, but the Treasury guidance, it's pretty open as long as, and I've always kind of looked at the 10%. That's, most grants usually have a limit on a 10%, no more than 10% towards administrative fees. And so I think that's a reasonable approach to take for this type of program. And it is an eligible expense under ARPA.
Okay, good to know. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Kula.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Thank you for getting this proposal together. I think that realistically, we are not going to be able to do this internally and among staff. And so having our already contracted partner is a really good place to begin, especially because of what Abhishek has proposed that SEDCOR provides as part of that it's more robust than us sending out, essentially sending out a call for grants and then looking at them again. It feels more likely that we're going to get changes and improvements to the business climate and worker improvements through it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Berschauer, thoughts?
Thank you, Chair. So I just have a clarification. So in total, we're talking about roughly 2.2 million. The 10% administrative fee, that is something that SEDCOR is requesting, and that is on top of what we already contract for. Is that correct?
So what we're requesting is 10% of the 1.13 that is being allocated into the program this year. SEDCOR's current contract with the county does not include grant program management or servicing. So this is above and beyond the work that we're currently contracted to do with the county. We also will be expanding our capacity in order to manage this program in a timely and efficient manner. So those are direct expenses for us to manage the program.
Okay, and then I know Carrie Martin has put together some, grant structures for us so far. Is that work that you would be relying on the county to do, or is that work that SEDCOR intends to do?
That would be work that SEDCOR would do in terms of drafting those programs. And then, as I mentioned in the proposal, our request for county staff would be to review what we put together and ensure that it meets Treasury guidelines and kind of county process, right? So is there anything that we're missing that the county has kind of set a precedent of doing or not doing? So just kind of like that sort of review. But we will be developing the full program and then asking just for a review to ensure that it meets all of your expectations and guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Abhishek. Oh, sorry, Ken, go ahead.
Well, and the one part that I think, with some of the questions about the administrative fees and the interactions, I think one of the parts is before we could release the funds, we would probably have to execute some type of an agreement where we could spell out the inner workings of the review, because one of the things that we're going to rely on just with any sub-recipient or anyone who's going to be assisting with getting these funds out to partners is we need to ensure that there's compliance with the Treasury guidelines. So as part of that agreement, we would have that guidance included in the agreement, and then we'd be looking at whether that's SEDCOR and then working with grant recipients that are then preparing the reports that should I have to, when it comes time for me to prepare reports to the US Treasury, we would have that required data that's built into those sub-agreements. We're making sure that we're collecting that data. The nice part with doing this, because we're already doing several other areas of the ARPA funding in-house, that instead of increasing FTEs or having to stand up additional or divert additional resources within the county, that we're trying to utilize partnerships to get these funds out, and so then that way we can concentrate on those program areas that are in-house, and then also do all the reporting that's going to be required for the years to come.
So as far as thank you, Ken, as far as the reporting, that would still be, would that be incumbent upon staff?
Well, I do the reports to the Treasury on how the county, because we were the direct recipients of the ARPA funds. So the Treasury reporting, would be my responsibility to do those reports as the grant administrator.
Okay, thank you. Abhishek?
And I appreciate where Ken is going, saying the process and approach of contracting with SEDCOR as a sub-recipient is really helpful, right? Because then we have those Treasury guidelines in writing and we can ensure that we adhere to them. Also in the proposal, so long as the timeline, right, keeps on track with what we've proposed, we expect to have a final program impact report to the board in March of 2022. And this would include all of the requirements that Ken has in regards to reporting about our activities in executing the grant program. So our plan, right, in this proposal is to have a full report to him in March that he can use then to go back and provide assurances that we've adhered to Treasury guidelines.
Thank you. So Abhishek, just for clarification, this is in addition to the contract that the county currently has as it exists today. And what would happen to the work that is to be done or supposed to be done under the terms of that original contract that we have, just the base contract that we have with SEDCOR?
So that contract is really a whole separate conversation from this one, the way that I see it, right? So we have that contract for the specific sort of work and service that we do for the county. This proposal is really a programmatic. It's around executing this specific program. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, so please let me know.
No, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. No, I understand it's an entirely different, we've got apples and we've got oranges, but we do have the base code, which is the original, the current SEDCOR contract. So my question is, what happens to the work for that contract to continue the work of that contract while SEDCOR is focusing on this work?
So I think this is a capacity question is what I'm hearing. And I see Eric also unmuted. So my response to that is that my work under the current contract still continues. And obviously some of my time will be needed to execute this program appropriately, but that's why we're adding capacity. So with this, what we get is an expanded access to the whole SEDCOR team. So we're engaging our marketing team in a much more significant way. As I mentioned, we are adding some capacity through contract work with somebody that we've worked with in the past to help us in terms of administratively. So to actually manage the communications, all the emails and the applications that come through to help us get those together, sort them, create packets for the review committees, all of that sort of thing. So in the proposal for the administration fee, that does include adding capacity on our end to be able to manage this program appropriately, while also continuing the work that we're currently doing by contract in the county. Eric, did I miss anything?
You said that very well, Abhishek. We would continue the work under that, the county contract on our kind of business retention expansion, and continue the work that we've already been, with Abhishek in the lead, already doing in Yamhill County. We've got several projects that are ongoing that will continue on, and it's also she mentioned our whole team that the contract is with SEDCOR, so we will ensure that work gets done and is prioritized as well.
Thank you. Commissioners, additional questions for Eric or Abhishek?
No, Chair, I don't have additional questions for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bershauer?
I don't have any further, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, this is just a work session, and Ken, go ahead.
I just wanted to note that I like with having the Early Learning Hub as the contractor and grant manager. I really appreciate how we're taking the approach of looking for the experts in the area, and we're guiding with our policy priorities what their project looks like, but they're doing the on the ground expert work. So I think this is a good model, and hopefully we can use it for some of the other ones, including maybe the broadband.
Well, we're looking for who is that expert that doesn't have a dog in the fight as far as the contracts. So thank you for that. Appreciate that. Ken?
Yeah, so what I was just going to kind of talk about, if we're not really looking for specific board action today. So based on if there's consensus that what's being proposed, what we could do is staff could work with Abhishek and Eric, and we could put together the agreement with the scope of work, essentially taking this proposal and attaching it to an agreement, and then that would come back for the board for further discussion and consideration, and just in an effort to kind of keep the ball rolling if there's agreement that what has been proposed here today, there's consensus to proceed.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think this is good information for us to consider, but I don't feel at this particular point ready to be able to say, let's go ahead and agree to this, because I still have bigger questions about the relationship with SEDCOR and the contract as a whole. So I don't know what the next step, and this might be a Christian question, as far as whether this would involve one-on-one communications with staff, executive session, another work session, so that we are looking at sort of the other components of the work. Christian?
Yeah. So are you asking about what or how we might take the next step in terms of entering into a new contract with SEDCOR for this work, or whether this work could be added to our existing contract?
No, I'm asking what the process is for the board going forward. How do we address this information, this proposal, and also the juxtaposition of the contract, which is coming up for renewal at the end of December. So I think that they do inform each other. And I think that if there were any kind of amendments or retooling of the existing contract. In light of this, I don't feel like we can at this particular point, or I don't feel comfortable at this point. Ken?
One thought that I would have, because as you were saying, Commissioner, and correct, that our current contract with SEDCOR is through December 31st. I would really like to see about or recommend scheduling that discussion to bring. I have a recommendation on how to proceed with the SEDCOR contract, because the current agreement allows for extensions of two 1-year extensions. And I do have thoughts on how what I'd like to recommend to the board. And so it seems like that should be scheduled as an agenda item. And I could work on that recommendation and have that ready for the board probably as early as I almost said next Thursday, the next week, when we resume our regular board schedule sessions on Thursdays. Because I see how it's related, but you're right, it's two different conversations or agreements. And I'm going to, I would like to extend the contract for another year and then be able to have some further discussions about that contract looking long-term, depending on what the board would like to do and what the board envisions as far as economic development services. Originally, when we built this contract, the intent was we did an RFP and we contracted out economic development services. And to be able to continue that, but at the same time, I also recognize that over the last year and a half, ever since March of 2020, there's been somewhat of a pivot in the scope of work, just because of the nature of the economy, the impacts of COVID-19 and everything else. And SEDCOR has played a very active role in supporting staff over the last 18 months and rolling out various emergency business grants and talking about recovery. It was less about expansion and recruitment and more about getting life preservers out there and keeping doors open and business retention and just helping people survive the current economic climate. And one of the thoughts that we could have in the discussions is revisiting the scope of work, that if we need to recognize that pivot that's occurred based on the current economic climate, maybe as part of that extension is looking at the existing scope of work and making modifications to reflect that pivot and the needs that are out there in the community. So, I mean, if there's interest to the board, I'd like to schedule this for the first meeting in December. Sorry, I keep trying to look at my calendar and I realize it's still on.
It's the 2nd.
Thank you, December 2nd, that we could bring that forward, that request forward for board consideration and discussion.
Thank you. I would like to make a recommendation that the commissioners, if you have any thoughts on a wish list or thoughts about the contract, the larger contract revisions or amendments to that and scope of work or anything in light of what Ken was mentioning, but also in light of the this proposal, if you have any specific. And maybe we can bring that back to our discussion on the 2nd to be able to say, look, this is what the commissioners brought to Ken, and this is how Ken is going to distill all of this as we have our next discussion. I think it'll just it'll reduce the amount of time we're trying to parse this during the meeting. We'll be able to spend some time thinking about it. So if you have any thoughts on overall, and then Ken can provide the contract, the scope of work that currently the current contract that we have, the scope of work to the commissioners, and then if you have any thoughts on what you'd like to see there, and either, revisions or whatever, and then also your thoughts on this particular proposal, and then we could come back and Commissioner, yes.
No, I just wanted to make sure that I got in line. I will note that I believe Christian has been trying to say something, but he's been coming on and off. And then I'll raise my thoughts.
Okay, sorry, Christian, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, no, not a problem. That process is the right approach, I think, and that works for me as well. I can certainly work with Ken and make sure that he has whatever documents the board needs to review and consider. But I agree. We've got two different scopes of work here, so keeping them separate and having two separate agreements works. And I think it would be appropriate for the board to have the conversation about this at the next work session. So that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Christian. Commissioner.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to note that since I brought up the broadband thing, I would issue a question then to SEDCOR about, do they know who can handle broadband grant administration and working with experts in the areas, or do they have that capability?
Thank you, Commissioner. Abhisha, you look like you're ready to go.
Yeah, I'm looking at Eric because I have a sense he's chiming in.
Okay, go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Chair Starrett. I just wanted to kind of comment on what Ken was saying, or back up a little bit of, even in our own work, the pivoting aspect of what we've learned over the last 18 months. I alluded to that earlier, but much of the work that we've been doing that we didn't see out there originally when we talked about this agreement were things like, some of the daycare, the Project Oasis work and daycare issues, workforce housing issues, and also just the PPE manufacturing. That was one thing that we were doing as a region that impacted every one of the counties that we work with, trying to get the manufacturers of PPE to get their products in with the state. But I say all that because all of that work is still industry led. It was us as SEDCOR identifying opportunities based on what we were receiving from the businesses that we're working with, whether they're on the EDAC or through other mechanisms in our other two counties that we serve. And it's been really interesting to see how nimble a system was. I think it was forced nimbleness, but at the same time, I think it's an exciting time to be kind of looking at, based on what we've learned, how we could look at that contract in the future to incorporate a pretty significant learning curve that not only have we had, I know you have had as well over the last 18 months. So we look forward to hearing your thoughts on that and continuing that conversation.
Thank you, Eric. Abhisha, anything else?
Yeah, in terms of the broadband question, it is difficult to identify who would be the right sort of a partner to consider executing a program like that in terms of use of funds. And I know, I believe I know that probably all of you at one point or another have been active in the Oregon Broadband Council meetings or kind of conversations. And that would probably be my first starting point to try to identify, because part of this issue is you might identify the right people, but they might not have a formal structure, right? An organization that you could actually transfer funds to manage that. So it's if I felt that SEDCOR had access to the right people, and then we had the ability kind of mechanically to manage the grant program and also that group of decision makers, that would be a different conversation. But we just haven't engaged folks in conversation about broadband in that way. I would be interested to attempt to do that, to see if that could be done in a good way, but I don't have a great immediate answer for that one. But thank you for the question, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And we will work on that. I mean, I think that's something we can continue to talk about and see what the resources are for the county.
Okay, maybe we should address the two issues we have before us and then move on to that question. But anything that you have to throw in for the discussion, I know we're eager because there are so many different providers who are part of the process that it's kind of hard to pick one out and say, will you be our advisor? There seems to be a little bit of a difficulty finding someone that doesn't have a conflict, but thank you for that. Appreciate that question, Commissioner.
Absolutely.
And
All right.
I would add that I need to share with you the reply from Business Oregon about broadband and spending and how to leverage money. So that's on my to-do list for today, is to share an email that I received, because I reached out to them asking them how, thoughts on how to go forward with it.
Okay.
It's incomplete, but it's a start.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Commissioner. Abhisha.
I just want to make sure I get one final request out there, but before we end for today's session, I realize that coming into December 2nd, right, we'll have 2 contract conversations on the table. And so I appreciate, Chair Starrett, your request to the group to say if there's anything that you have by way of recommendation or request or interest in terms of including in future scopes of work or reporting structure, that I welcome that very wholeheartedly. And I am also concerned about timeline, right? So we're coming into December 2nd amidst the holidays. And I know staff capacity is at a premium. And so I want to be able to address all of those questions that you have on December 2nd. So if there's any way that we can get those from you, and I don't know if that goes through Ken or what the appropriate process is, but we very much wholeheartedly welcome them so that we can have all of those questions answered for you by the time we meet on the 2nd.
Thank you. I think it's probably most appropriate if Ken is the contact. In other words, you're receiving the information, the requests, the questions, the input from the commissioners, and then distilling that and sharing that with SEDCOR prior to the 2nd, just so that if there are any questions that you might be comfortable answering in advance of that.
Thank you.
Okay. If there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you for joining us, Abhisha and Eric. Appreciate it, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you all too. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to item F. We have no department updates. Consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? I would like to request we remove item number 6, item number G6 from the consent agenda for further discussion. And maybe this is something Ken can answer, or we can wait until the 2nd as well. So if I can have a motion to approve the consent agenda with anything else that the commissioners want to remove.
Chair, I would move approval of the consent agenda, subtracting item G6.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have a motion to approve. Further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes. Okay, item G6 is the approval of a purchase agreement between Yamhill County Public Health and Alaska Structures for the purchase of 2 fabric suture structures in the amount of $29,601. And this is, again, has to do with capacity for our 2 fabric structures for drive-through public health testing and vaccine clinics. I just wanted to get an idea on the, go ahead, Ken.
I was just going to ask if, to allow me time to see if Director Manfred was available to join, if we wanted to hold off and do this towards the end of the other business. That would give me time to get on the phone really quick and see if Director Manfred's available to join us.
Okay, it might just be as simple as one quick question in terms of the funding stream for this. And that's pretty much what I'm looking at, just some clarifications and a couple of questions about that going forward. So yeah, we'll go ahead and
I'll jump on the phone.
Okay, great. So we'll motion to approve the consent agenda. We've got that. We've got item 6 that we're going to put on hold, and we'll move to item H. Old business, we have none. And item I, item I1, consideration of approval of a letter to the West Valley Fire District Board of Directors regarding the ambulance service area. And just a little background on this, that we had received this letter really doesn't say much other than it's I believe, an acknowledgement. And I have it in the packet there, just an acknowledgement that we have received their information. And we want to just acknowledge that. We are going to be talking to the ASA, having a meeting on the 29th, and they will be able to look at sort of the bigger picture here. The other thing is we did just receive a preliminary draft report from them. It came over the weekend. I sent it to Ken. Ken will then disperse it to the commissioners, and it will go in the ASA board packet as well. And we will then we're not making any decisions today. I thought it was just appropriate to ask the board to agree that we will acknowledge that they did correspond to us, asking for an extension until December 15th. And just that we say, thank you for your letter. Here's your extension, if that's appropriate, and there's the letter. So a motion to approve.
Chair, I would approve.
Go ahead. Oh, Chair, I move approval of item I1.
Okay, motion to approve item I1. Further discussion? All those.
Chair, I would just say thank you for continuing to move us forward on this so that we know and so that the issue is addressed. I realize that it's in a bit of a crisis moment, but these things work slowly and they require pressure.
Thank you.
Yeah. And they have responded. They have set up stakeholder meetings, and they're pushing forward. So that's wonderful to see as well. So thank you.
And I do want to acknowledge City Manager, Willamina City Manager Kenna West, for really, really becoming a player in this in terms of the city, reaching out, forming that stakeholder group, and giving significant input. We have that, and also I think it's really a good indication that we received this preliminary strategic plan this weekend, which you should probably have in your inboxes even as we speak. So we have a motion to approve item I1 without further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you for that. On to item I2, consideration of approval to authorize Health and Human Services Director or Designee on behalf of Yamhill County Health and Human Services to submit an application for funding from the Oregon Health Authority in the approximate amount of $7,000. I think you've read the specifics on this. This is incentive pay, and this is just makes these positions more competitive so that we don't have to deal with the recruitment concerns that, and they did find out that this money could be used for those types of purposes. So if there's nothing else, I would move approval of item I2. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes. On to item I3, consideration of approval to authorize position authority for the Facilities Division to hire 2 Maintenance Worker 1 positions. And Ken, I know that it's been a struggle from an administrative point of view to be able to get this work done, and we're all seeing it in our respective buildings.
Correct. So this is something working with our facilities manager, Joe Moore, and also Justin is heavily involved with this. We're looking at the staffing levels in maintenance and both identified needs and struggles that we're currently having with both janitorial services, but then also facilities is getting a lot of work these days. There's whether it's just basic facilities maintenance, but then also keeping up with a lot of the requirements and facilities needs that we have. We recognize that we need to add some additional workers, and so then that's what Joe has proposed, adding 2 FTEs to his budget as maintenance ones to help supplement his current workforce and getting his head above water.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve?
Chair, I move that we approve.
Motion to approve item I3. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes. On to item I4, consideration of approval of a personal services contract between Yamhill County and Nicelle Garcia Duffy for court mediation services in the amount of $85 per hour, not to exceed 5 hours per original case filing. And this is retroactive to October 7th, 2021 through June 30, 2022. Christian?
Yeah, this is simply the latest agreement that we are entering into on behalf of the circuit court. This is simply the way that it's structured under the statute, and they've had a need to replace a couple of their court mediators recently, and this is the latest in those agreements.
Thank you. And that's outlined in the packet too. So we have a motion to approve item I4. Bless
So-
you. Bless you.
So moved, and bless you, Commissioner Kula.
I was like, I can't make a
I
motion
second
right now.
that.
I'm sorry, Chair.
We have a motion to bless Commissioner Kula. All those in favor? Aye.
Let's vote on the real one too while we're at it.
Commissioner Bershauer, you have a
I move approval of item I4.
motion to approve item I4. Further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Motion passes. On to item I5. Consideration of approval of an immediate opportunity fund grant agreement between Yamhill County and Willamette Valley Vineyards DBA Bernal Estate for the Oregon 99W road improvements not to exceed $724,500 effective upon full execution by all parties. This seems like it's been going on forever, but it's only been in the last year. So Christian, do you want to add the specifics of the bond?
Yeah, as you excuse me, as you'll recall, this is the sub-agreement for us to allow us to provide funds to Willamette Valley Vineyards for work related to the Highway 99 improvements, and there, under the Immediate Opportunity Fund grant program, there is a job creation and retention requirement. For this project, it's 23 full-time FTE retained for a minimum of 12 months. And when the board discussed this previously, we talked about the added risk that added and proposed to Willamette Valley Vineyards that they provide a financial guarantee bond in the full amount of the grant to ensure their compliance with that FTE creation and retention requirement. And so that bond, it took a while to get that negotiated, but it's now included as an exhibit to the agreement. So with that, I think the agreement is ready for the board to consider.
I do have one question, and this is relative to the current job market we're in. And I'm wondering, and I know that they have a bond to cover this, and this is, I think there's great wisdom in that. But the other thing is, would they be able to sort of have an affirmative defense, if you will, that the job market makes it prohibitive to fulfill that 23 FTEs for an entire year? And would that be something that would be consideration?
Well, the requirement is and you may, I'm sure, I think you are all aware of this already. The job creation requirement is not specific to this new facility, but it is across Willamette Valley Vineyards' entire operation. And so I know that was something that was taken into consideration and considered when they first signed up for the grant. So that will hopefully make the 23 positions easier to achieve. At the moment, there is no language in the agreement to address a failure to create and retain the necessary positions beyond language that says if for example they are only able to create 20 out of the 23, then there would be a need to pay ODOT back at a prorated amount for for the positions that couldn't be filled. If we wanted to consider making a change to that's a conversation that I think we'd have to have with ODOT and the grant program managers.
No, that was just a sort of rhetorical question. Commissioner Kula?
Oh, thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask Christian. My understanding, but I just want to clarify with Christian, is that ODOT would be the one to determine whether Willamette Valley Vineyards has met the requirements as laid out in the contract. Is that correct? Not us, right?
Yeah. Right. The way the contracts, excuse me, the way the contract's drafted, they'll provide us with documentation and certification that they've met the requirement. That'll get passed on to ODOT, and ODOT will make the determination themselves as to whether or not it's been satisfied. That's right.
Thank you. We have
Well, Chair,
go ahead.
I would say that I was about to make a motion to approve, but I wanted to get the exact. I move that we approve item G. No,
I.
item I.
5.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to Ken and Christian for your work on this over what does seem longer than a year, but and for the creative, the willingness to be flexible on behalf of Brno and Willamette Valley Vineyards, because I realized they did this work with ODOT in good faith, and we also took serious our duties. So I appreciate that. Sorry, that was a long motion. I move we approve item I5.
We have a motion to approve. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. And thank you, Christian, for that. It was a long negotiation. On to item I6, consideration of approval of extending the COVID-19 paid administrative leave policy per board order 20-91 retroactive to November 10, 2021 through December 31st, 2021. Ken?
Yes, so this was something that the 30 days snuck up on me pretty quickly. And we still have a need to have this paid administrative leave policy in place. We're still having, challenges with folks getting quarantined. And so I'm asking to extend it. And with the holidays and everything else, that 30 days goes really quickly. So I'm actually asking for more than just a 30-day extension to at least take it through the end of the calendar year. And then we can revisit this in December.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve item I6?
Chair, I move that we approve.
Chair, I move we approve item I6.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. On to item I7, discussion of invitation to join pilot project on city-county coordinated homelessness response. And I don't know if the other commissioners received this information prior to this from Lizzie Atwood at AOC, but I know Ken got it, and maybe that's where it was disseminated. But in any event, we've got the information, and just wondering what your thoughts were. This is a discussion. I don't know that we necessarily need a board action if there is consensus or no consensus, but if there's anything that you wanted to add as far as Yamhill County's part in this. So we'll go ahead and open up the discussion.
Chair, I would say that on my side of things, I think that this would benefit. I'm interested in it, but I want to make sure that we have all the folks that we would be piloting a coordination with here to discuss it. And I see that as our two largest cities and YCAP. And so I think it would be important to have them, and then a couple of the other folks that maybe they're working with. And so I would be open towards that, and to have a work session where we bring them in, like yes or no, or even coordinating the emails. I just want to make sure that if we're moving forward with this, that we're moving forward with the cooperation of those we'd be coordinating with.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Berschauer, thoughts?
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I'm just curious as to how this is different from a lot of the work that we have been doing and the groups that we have been talking to through YCAP or other organizations. I feel like it's a bit repetitive, but obviously this is a critical issue, so we want to do what we can. But I mean, Commissioner Kula, how do you've been having a lot of these discussions too, and we have sat in on many of them. How do you see this as being different?
Well, forgive me, but what I should do by answering it is say that I will get more information, but you can probably get more information too, because I know that Marion County just initiated something on their own with, I believe, the city of Salem and Kaiser, almost, and it may even just come from their work, this legislative concept. So I will actually reach out to them to find out their why they took the initiative to do that, and maybe we can go from there.
Yeah, I think Marion County is actually hiring someone to oversee that particular policy issue too. So they're really taking a giant leap forward, which is fantastic. I'm just not sure, I'm not sure how this actually does any more promotion of cooperation than we already have. So yeah, I mean, more information is good. So
sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I agree with that. More information is good. A couple of things initially is when we're talking about this legislative concept and the pilot, you're talking about $5 million in appropriations to support 5 counties and partner cities. Couple of things, we're looking at more bureaucracy. Okay, so we're looking at paying an office director and support staff. You're talking about stipends for people with lived experience to support policy development. So once again, we're using money to do, as you mentioned, Commissioner Bershauer, a lot of the work that we're doing. For instance, let's talk about the Housing Authority. Housing Authority, on our board, we have people with lived experience who are informing the process that Housing Authority uses for various programs. And a lot of it comes under these categories. YCAP, the CCO. The CCO is funding in partnership with Health and Human Services, is partnering our Sheridan supportive housing project for veterans and for people in recovery. I don't think we need to pay more staff to do this. They're looking at someone to do communications and public engagement. And once again, whenever you get government involved at another layer it's another layer of cost, and each pilot, so each county would receive $1 million. And at the end of the day, I don't know that we would have anything more robust than what we are doing here in Yamhill County. I think is very cost effective, and the players, Housing Authority, YCAP, the CCO, Providence, have been very proactive in these types of work. So I'm not, on the first blush, I'm skeptical about this, because it's just, again, I feel like it's more government funded programs to do what we're doing. Commissioner Kula?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I certainly echo your, I think the foundational concerns that you have, because I think about what $1 million could do in helping with the Housing Authority's large development project, right? On the flip side, I do know that when each organization is working independently, sometimes that can be both redundant, overlapping, and kind of in opposition to one another. So having somebody, having a person who is actually coordinating that work across the county seems like it could be very valuable. The other part of that is that folks with lived experience who are interacting with folks who are homeless is also a great benefit, because as you know, and as we've seen, and like with the crisis at Dustin Court and Marsh Lane, folks did not want to talk to social workers, counselors, folks at YCAP, but they had a trust built that people were getting to with things like the motel sheltering project. So when I look at what the request is here, It's counties have been invited to support a legislative concept. I think it would be worthwhile for us, before saying no, this is just my personal view here, is it would be worthwhile for us to find out from the cities and from YCAP and from Housing Authority, because you're right that Housing Authority is a really important part of this, whether there is a need for that.
Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, and I was just going to just quickly, because the request that came from AOC, just like Commissioner Kula was talking about, is they were looking for support in any counties that would be like to be considered for the pilot. The one thing that I'm not sure if this is standing up a new program, or if whether or not these funds could possibly be used to maybe strengthen or support or fund existing programs. That's a question that I have about this, but because it's still just a legislative concept, we don't have much details beyond what's in this email. So another approach, would be whether or not, with the existing programs that we do have, of whether or not this is funding that would be available to help offset the costs for existing programs, or bolster existing programs. Or I'm just thinking it might be another approach, but again, we're kind of missing information. So that way it's not necessarily duplicating services or standing up something new, that if we have existing programs, it might have us in a better position to participate possibly in a pilot if we can use it for existing program areas. Just, the email announcement is pretty vague in a lot of these areas, exactly what they're looking for. It's asking for both interest in being a pilot, or supporting the legislative concept. And again, if there's additional questions, I guess we could follow up with Lizzie at AOC with additional questions, or explore this further.
Thank you for that. I think being asked to support or to be considered as one of the counties, one of the pilot communities, without seeing the legislative concept is sort of like we're kind of flying blind. And I hate to just commit us and our cities if we're not, if this is a legislative concept that our partners either see as redundant, or, sometimes when you're doing the work, and I have to say, when you see how well the CCO works with YCAP, when you see how well the CCO works with, and Housing Authority works with YCAP, there really is a synergy there, and they don't need a paid position to do that. They're at the table, and they're working together, and they're getting things done. Look at the Sheridan Housing Project. Yes, it's been years in the making, but that was a coordination for a intergenerational or multi-generational project with what the Housing Authority has across the street and what we want to do for recovery. So I say sometimes the more bureaucrats and the more government layers you get involved in things, the longer it takes and the less you have to show for it. I just want to be real careful. We're not committing ourselves to something and we don't know what that something is. Commissioner Kula?
Sure. I thank you for those thoughts. I do want to note that in looking and reading more carefully, it sounds like the staffing needs that YCAP is looking for litigation center, that they have the funding for the physical space, but they don't have the operating. It looks like, based upon the reading, that this could cover their staffing needs and our operational needs there. So if, since you're on the board of YCAP, could you ask Alexandra and the rest of your board, if needed, about whether that you thought that would go in? Because this is an existing need that's going to have to come from somewhere, or they're going to need to get the money back. And they won't have the service providing.
Right. I just want to make sure, again, since we don't have very much meat on the bones of this LC at this point, we don't know what's going to be, what would be included and what would be covered. So while I'm in for getting more information, I just want to make sure that we're not going to go ahead and say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do it when we don't know what it is. But yes, I'm sure that they would have something to say, Housing Authority and YCAP, on whether or not this would be of use to them. Ken? Okay, no, I was just looking at your nonverbal communication, and you look like you had something to say. Okay, thank you. So at this point, do we want to just try to get a little bit more information from both from Lizzie and from our partners in the community and get their thoughts on this, and then maybe come back and discuss this so that we can get back to Lizzie with at AOC? Okay, sound good? All right, so we really don't need a board action on that. That was just a discussion. Can I ask for a 5-minute break before we begin our public hearing?
Oh, just a reminder, I have Director Manfred.
Oh,
who's
yes,
ready to
item
join, so
6.
we can talk about. So Carolina, if you could go ahead and move Lindsay to the panel.
And Chair, I just like to note that I love that Alaska Structures is on Camelback Road in Phoenix.
Well, seeing as I used to live right near there, I found it kind of interesting that people who live in the desert are helping people who don't live in the desert, because they don't have to worry about rain on a regular basis. Anyway, thank you, Director Manfred, for joining us. And yes, I just wanted a little bit more in terms of the funding stream of the for the tents.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the funding stream that we are using is we've checked and we can use the equity vaccine funding to help support the purchase of these, which, and I'll just very briefly can share, we, as more and more businesses and places are open, which is fantastic and wonderful, it's meant less options and places for us to be able to run vaccine and testing clinics. We've been able to get by doing them outside, but as the weather has been changing, as you all know, it's been getting harder and harder to do that and to be able to do that safely. We've also tried purchasing some lower quality tents and have actually had them blown away, which is a very concerning thing, because that could be very dangerous if you're thinking about a large tent flying through the air with our staff, our volunteers, and certainly people who are seeking our services. And so our public health manager went out to get bids and quotes on various options, and this was the one that we felt best meet our needs.
Thank you. Question is, as for the setup of these, the location, will there be a fixed location, or will this be something that will be mobile?
Right now, the large tent will have a fixed location at the fairgrounds. They've worked with us to be able to find a location. We're not able to easily use the insides of those buildings for various reasons, but they are happy to let us use some of their property.
So they'd be fixed locations at the fairground.
Correct.
Okay. Commissioners, questions?
No, I can understand why you would need these. And I also recognize the long-term usefulness of these structures for both emergency response to other things besides a pandemic. And also in the event that we need to do, as you know, you've trained, bioweapons work. I remember that this was, we need to have spaces where people can come and connect with public health.
All right. So if there are no other questions, I will move approval of item, let's see, that would be G6. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in, Ken, did you have further discussion?
Technically, because this was removed from the consent agenda,
Okay.
so it's actually the agenda item would be I8, because we're going to add it to the end of other business. So this would I just wanted to be able to clarify for the motion, it would be I8.
Okay. Motion to approve item I8. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks,
We
Commissioners.
appreciate that. Thank you. All right, so if we can go ahead and take a recess and then come back in 5 minutes at the point of our public hearing, which is item J. Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like everybody is back. We'll come back out of recess. This is the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for November 22nd and 2021. And this is at the point of the public hearing. So we'll open up the public hearing. And item J on our agenda, and joining us is our planning director, Ken Friday. Ken, thanks for being with us. This is item J1, docket RD1-23-21, an appeal of the planning director's approval of a replacement dwelling at 11940 Southeast Boyer Road, McMinnville. The applicant is Ronald Martin. The appellant is Barbara Boyer, and this was continued from October 28th, 2021, and will begin at the point of staff recommendation. Ken?
Yes. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. There was no final rebuttal given by the applicant as they had already submitted it during the second open record period. So I just wanted to confirm that. As for the staff recommendation, first off, I very much appreciate and respect the concerns voiced by Barbara Boyer on this replacement dwelling approval. And I in no way intend to say anything to diminish her arguments. However, for me to recommend denial of the replacement dwelling request, I want to be certain that this home was placed as a hardship dwelling and that it doesn't qualify for replacement. And this is especially true when we're talking about a dwelling that all parties agree has been there on the site for several decades. In looking at the records, there is enough doubt that I cannot conclude that this was a hardship dwelling. In short, the reasons are as follows. Number one, the dwelling's on its own parcel. Hardship dwellings are usually shared on a parcel that has a primary residence. Second, the dwelling has its own septic system. The dwelling is not on the hardship dwelling renewal list. And this property was placed on the assessment rolls nearly a decade after the hardship was approved. For these reasons, I recommend approval of the replacement dwelling request by Ronald Martin with the 3 conditions listed in the staff report.
Thank you, Ken. Commissioners? Questions?
No, Chair, I don't think I have questions for Ken, but I appreciate you continuing to look into it and to use your best judgment here on the records that we have.
Thank you.
Chair,
Commissioner?
I just have, it's kind of a general question for Ken, but out of curiosity, a non-conforming use application, what kind of goes into that, and what's the timeline typically for something like that?
Usually it would be about 6 to 8 weeks to go through the process. They would provide information showing that this was a non-conforming use and has been there for over 10 years. In looking at the record, it looks like that's probably been there for over 15 years as a non-conforming use. Anyway, they submit the information. It's a type A application. I review it, write a staff report. We send out a decision, and there's 15 days for anyone to appeal the decision to the Board of Commissioners.
Okay, so there was a suggestion earlier that the applicant kind of drop this and go through the process that way. So you said about 6 weeks to process. Is there a cost associated as well? Oh,
Yeah, yes, I don't have it right in front of me, sorry. But it's like $1,170, something like that.
okay. All right, thank you.
And then Ken, I guess I have a follow-up question, Chair, if I may.
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay, so I am one of the arguments that Barbara Boyer presented was that this could lead to she used the word precedent. I'm not going to use the word precedent, but to other situations where properties that have had homes on them or that had a hardship dwelling, but there's not enough documentation of it, leading to more of these applications on land, kind of eroding the farmland is for farming tenants that we hold to. What do you think?
You know, I understand her concern. I don't think it will lead to that. Most of our hardship dwellings have been tracked for the last nearly 30 years, coming up on 28 years. We've been tracking them. Usually a hardship dwelling, it's rare for it to go beyond 10 to 15 years. So I believe we have all of them in the system. Obviously, it's possible that this was a hardship. It's possible that we've got others out there that are hardships, but I don't think that number would be at all high. Usually we're able to recognize them pretty readily at the counter, and this one just has a lot of different circumstances, and I don't believe we would see something like this. I've not seen a situation like this, and I've been here a few years, so I don't think that is a large concern.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. You have a lot more history with this than I do, so I appreciate your perspective.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a few thoughts. I think it's legitimate to ask whether or not this would set a precedent, and obviously there's would be concerns if that was in fact what looked like could happen. But one of the things I've appreciated about our planning department is that they take each one of these situations for the different circumstances and that they present. You know, there is no one size fits all. There are mitigating circumstances. There are contributing factors to each one of them. And so I don't see that it serves any purpose to deny the approval of this replacement, because you're looking at someone who is going to be able to be housed there, and the greater good in that instance, we wouldn't see farming. We wouldn't see farming going on there unless it would be sort of a tortuous process. From what I'm understanding, to be able to say that we're going to return this to farmland because of the specifics of this piece of property. So, those are the thoughts that I have. Commissioner Kula.
Sure. Are we? Do we go into deliberations now, or is there a need to do a hard line to that?
No, I'm just making a statement. So if,
okay.
We would go into deliberations, and your thoughts.
Well, Chair, thank you, Director Friday. Chair, I'm not particularly interested in the argument about this is a built and committed piece of land, because who knows what the future holds for farming in Oregon and Yamhill County in particular. Small scale farming, we're not really here, in my view, to judge whether this is a viable piece of land. What I do see here, though, is that I believe that the requirements have been met for this application without going into whether this is a viable piece of farmland or not, and especially with the records that we received in the final period.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bershauer, further thoughts before we entertain a motion?
I would agree that with Mr. Friday that you know, the record is somewhat unclear as to how this all started, but to his best judgment, that a replacement dwelling can be approved. And certainly, you know, if we want to leave the farming aspect out of it, we still have a housing aspect that we could consider. And this particular replacement dwelling would have an immediate and critical impact on that particular family. So I am inclined to uphold Mr. Friday's position.
Christian, are you trying to weigh in? Is that Christian?
Yeah, I think this may get to Commissioner Kula's comment from earlier. If you're at the point of deliberating, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but you probably want to close the hearing and then go into deliberations.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you for weighing in on process, and thank you, Commissioner. So we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and continue our deliberations. Thank you, Christian. All right, Commissioners, thoughts, Commissioner Kula.
I will say that while the uncertainty of records, in my view, leans me towards approving it based upon what I have in the record. I will also say that it's not my judgment as, again, a farmer and a farmland owner, and the potential conflict of that. I don't believe that this is going to impact neighboring farm practices either, especially across the road, across the concrete of old 99W.
Thank you, Commissioner. So at this point, do we have a motion? I'll go ahead and make a motion to uphold the planning director's approval of a replacement dwelling and to deny the appeal. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. And thank you, Ken. I appreciate your continuing to look into this. And one thing I've said all along is that one thing is that through your department, and it has traditionally been that way, that you get a fair shake and that everybody looks at it without a jaundiced eye. So thank you for that. We appreciate that.
And so findings coming back in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Since Christian's kind of under the weather, I'm going to throw that out there, and we'll provide those.
Okay, thank you. So then we'll have findings.
If we could maybe make that 3 weeks, given the holiday, and then I'm actually scheduled to be out of the office a couple of days next week as well. If we could say 3 weeks, that would be ideal.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Looking at a date here, so that would bring us up to December 16th to adopt findings. Okay, thank you. All right. Well, we'll go on to announcements. Item K. Do we have announcements, commissioners? All right.
Sure. I just wanted to note that as I told you before, I presented to the Home Builders Alliance of Portland, specifically on the issue of water, since their builders are now building in the Yamhill County area. I wanted to make sure that they understood water situations in different cities and in the rural areas. And then Cynthia and I went on a transit facilities, both transit center and operational facilities tour in Wilsonville. And it was good to see both what they've done there, what the price was, and what they wish they had done differently. So more to come, but that's a good start to a conversation about transit facilities.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Commissioner Berschauer, announcements?
Chair, the only one I can think of is the Shop with a Cop for Newburgh-Dundee PD. I posted this online yesterday or a couple days ago, but that is December 11th. And I'm sure Mayor Rick Rogers would love for us to be there and attend, but this is their 11th year. And they actually have school teachers and counselors choose the families that would be shopping with the police officers. So it's a very special way that they get lined up with them. But that's December 11th at 2 o'clock.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. And just an update, the Yamhill County Family Wellbeing Council is working with a DHS funded staff that reaches out to at-risk families and works with them to keep kids out of the system, which is very much appreciated through Lutheran and a variety of our partners. And also, I want to just give a shout out to the Mental Health and Disabilities Advisory Council. This is a group that continues to do really good work in holding agencies accountable and really has a real sensitive eye towards mental health issues and people in the community. So I'm always impressed with the work that's done on that commission. So if there's nothing else for the good of the order, Commissioner Ken.
Ken too, but I'll just go real quick, and that's that I saw the article in the paper about the Dayton Landing Park, and it sounds like different perspectives on what's happening there. And I would request that if we can get an update, either from Ken or from the city and from Ken, I feel like for the community, it would be good for them to know about what's happening at their county park, but also for the larger community, but also for the city of Dayton residents. And then from my side, I would love to know what kind of the next steps are with that place, with that wonderful location.
Thank you. And this has been an issue that's been ongoing for years, that we've been struggling for years. So we have to be very careful that we're not placing blame on any particular person or agency, because this has been a long-standing challenge between the county and the city. So Ken, if you wanted to wrap that up, you can mention you've been involved in this for a long time.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to. And then I'd also, based on the question and this being brought up, is I could also connect with Ben and get a latest update on kind of where we're at. I believe Ben was hoping, and that meeting may have occurred last week, to meet with the city to have some further discussions about the site. I can give a history on it, but in kind of the interest of time, that site is not without its challenges. It's a very, very old boat launch that was constructed a long time ago. And I know the struggles that I had when I was the parks manager, that a dozen years ago, it was really hard to even get additional funds or even to prioritize that site, because at that time, the Oregon State Marine Board and any grant funds for boating facilities were really prioritized towards, motorized boats. And where this site historically hasn't seen, just by the nature of the river, you didn't have a large number of motorized boats that would utilize that site. It was more of the non-motorized boaters. And over time, the Oregon State Marine Board, through legislative actions and some changes within the organization, have now, instead of just strictly looking at motorized boat facilities as being the priority, because again, their funding is based on licensing and registration of motorized boats, they're also including non-motorized boats. And then the conversations had started to pick up over the last several years, to where this site was no longer just kind of an oversight, that it was actually on the State Marine Board's radar as a site that, to make an investment and make those improvements on the boat launch. The site is not without its challenges as well, because I know when Brett Henry was the parks manager at that time, some of the struggles had to do with the location of the boat launch, because it's immediately adjacent to where Palmer Creek comes into the Yamhill River. And so then there were some environmental concerns. And so then the recommendations were you really couldn't do any work to the existing site. You had to move it to a new site. So and then as you progress through it with later planning, then there was the discussion around the restroom and whether or not, a vault restroom versus flush restrooms, and how that was going to evolve. A lot of those conversations I was not involved with, but that site has just been, the intent has always been there to improve that site and make the improvements, both to be an asset for the Yamhill County Park System, but also for the city of Dayton. It's not unusual to have a boat launch site like this in close proximity or within city limits, because Rogers Landing is very close to being in a similar type situation. I think it's just trying to work through knowing that we don't necessarily have funds that are readily available to make those necessary improvements, and then also navigating all the environmental and permitting requirements that goes into any type of work involving a boat launch. It's going to take time, and I'm really hoping that between our Parks Board and Parks Manager and working with the city of Dayton, and then also working with interested parties, in seeing that site improve, that we can come up with workable solutions on a long-term plan. Because I know right now the planning is on rehabbing the existing boat launch where it's at as an initial phase, and then hopefully having later phases that can make further improvements to the site. But again, I'm really hoping to have another follow-up conversation with Ben and get some more updates on that.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that. Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and I appreciate Commissioner Kula bringing that up, because there's a lot of frustration around how the News Register is misrepresenting this particular project to our communities. I was messaging Mayor Wojtowski last night, and she was pretty shocked to see how her quotes were portrayed in the paper. and certainly did not agree with the way that it was presented. And so our Parks Director, Ben Much, actually did have that meeting on Thursday with the city. He's been very proactive. He said, you know, I just came into this job fairly recently, so I've been dealing with a whole, you know, all sorts of things. Rogers Landing takes a lot of time. Some of our other parks take a lot of time. So he's trying to get caught up and work through some of the issues that OSMB had with the city early on. There was a lot of miscommunication. It does not make sense to put a vault toilet in a place that floods. So I know Mayor Wojtowski is very passionate about potentially leasing this park because it is the only county park that is actually fully surrounded by city in a city limit. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. So that's a longer discussion. But to get to the point where we satisfy OSMB's requirements so that they can move forward and actually redoing the ramp, Ben has been having those conversations, and he reported that the Thursday's meeting was very productive. So I'm hopeful that we can continue to move forward and he can sort of be free to continue to get that rolling so that we don't have a missed opportunity. But it was really unfortunate to see the News Register report it as a missed opportunity, because that is not the truth of what's going on. And I want to just relay that Mayor Wojtowski did not appreciate how her quotes were portrayed. She has been actively trying to work on this, getting to a solution, as has Mr. Much. So we appreciate them both.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. I know that with Mayor Wojtowski has been very frustrated with this, as have we, because when you're dealing with municipalities and when you're dealing with all the different layers of government from the state, the county, and the city, it seemed I've had this conversation with Ken over the years or a year or so, just basically saying, hey, wouldn't it just be an easier fix if we just transfer the park to the city? But there are so many other considerations. It just seems so simple. But then when you're dealing with the reality of all the bureaucracy, it's not that easy. So I've appreciated the frustration that the mayor has had. And I know we've had that too. And it's unfortunate because it's a wonderful location. And I've kayaked down there for a number of years and been kind of, you know, the wish list of wouldn't it be nice if this were improved. So I appreciate that, and it's unfortunate that once again that we're seeing mischaracterizations of issues and placing blame and quotes that are taken out of context by the News Register, and that is an ongoing problem. In any event, I really encourage people, if you've got an issue or a concern or a question, that you contact any of us so that we can set the record straight, that you can actually get the facts. So if there's nothing else for the good of the order, Commissioner Ken?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to provide some really quick updates, and I know being mindful of the time that we have left. I just thought it would be really important. There's a lot of work that's happening behind the scenes with our ERP project, which is our finance system replacement. I'm currently working with our project management team on preparing an update or a report to provide to the board where we're at and providing some updates on a more regular basis. So stay tuned for more information about that. There's a lot happening as far as data conversion and getting the system set up and starting to move data. And we're starting to see, at this point, we're starting to see what our data looks like in the new system. In fact, we're going to have a whole series of meetings over the next couple of weeks where we're meeting with the consultant. And I just want to recognize especially Mike Barnhart and Jennifer Elkins in the accounting office, who are really leading this effort. But we also have various department heads and that are also involved with this project. And there's just a lot of work that's occurring behind the scenes in trying to keep us on the project schedule and with the deadline, because we are looking at going live with some aspects of the program next year. And so I just want to recognize all that work and stay tuned for some more regular reports and updates coming in the near future. The second part that I just wanted to give the board a quick update, if you get a chance to drop into the HR office, I'm pleased to announce that Patricia Rojas is our new HR Human Resources Director. She started a couple weeks ago, so she's into week 3 in the office, and she's still continuing to come here. And so that's a positive sign. And I know that's a very busy office, and it's one that we've really struggled not having an HR director for the last several months. Has really impacted us workload wise, and I'm really excited to have Patricia joining the team, and just want to hopefully the commissioners get a chance to stop in and say hello, and I'd be happy to have her join an upcoming formal session so we can make that introduction as well. And I think that's all I had for just some quick updates.
Thank you, Ken. I did have the opportunity to visit with Patricia, and she's delightful. And I let her know because I saw her the second day after her first day in the office. And I think we all said the same thing to her. You're back. Thank you. And so she's been hard at work. It's a challenging office, especially these days. And she's really seems to be hitting the ground running. So we're grateful. So yeah, I'd love to have her join us so that we can put a public face to the name. So anyway, welcome, Patricia. Okay, anything else, Ken?
And sorry, and the last item, I missed my last note here. The other is the capital planning for, the space needs analysis and working with Sarah Architects. We're getting ready to kick off some of our first meetings, first with some department heads, and then we'll be looking at scheduling a work session in the near future to come and talk to the board, so then we can start working on that capital plan, and then also hopefully start the conversation that once we have enough information to answer questions about getting on the courthouse improvement list at some point. Right now, I don't know if we have sufficient information to present to the state to get on the list, but I'm really hoping that's going to be one of the quick outcomes, that it's early as possible in the process as we go through this capital planning, because I know that's going to be a multi-year wait just to get on that list. And I believe the commissioners may have received that invite or information from Rob Bovet at AOC talking about the facilities plan. So I'm really hoping that we'll be able to get the courthouse, because I know in conversations with the courts, there's going to be some additional needs within the courthouse where they're needing additional space. And in order to accommodate that, we're going to have to look at making some improvements to the courthouse, or possibly relocating even more county departments out of the courthouse, and then finding a place to where we're going to set up shop. So that's another item that will be coming forward here shortly. And then the last item, it didn't make it onto the calendar, but on December 2nd, the sheriff was hoping to have a work session and to talk about the radio system update. And I just wanted to make sure that the board is okay with us go ahead and putting that on the work session schedule for December 2nd. The sheriff's going to be joining with his consultant that did a review of the radio system. So they're going to be providing an update of that survey and review.
Thank you. Thanks, Ken. Well, I want to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody, and we have a lot to be grateful for. And I would just encourage everybody to find somebody who has nowhere to go Thanksgiving and bring them home, or wherever you're going to go, and just make them feel welcome. All right. Well, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you all.